Amazing, amazing. And I do just want to let you all know that we have some experiences here for you after the book club meeting. So we would like for you to stay around. After the conversation, we have an oral history project that I know I put out in my communications that we would love your participation with. We want to hear your stories because we want them to remain a part of the archive at the library. And then those of you who aren't members, we do want to also make sure that you stay connected with us and see if we can make sure that you're plugged in before you leave today. Okay, so I am going to get started by reading the bios of our panel today. Okay, I am going to start with Mayor Karen Bass. Mayor Karen. Absolutely, well deserved. Mayor Karen Bass has led the nation's second largest city with unprecedented urgency that has delivered results for all Angelenos. Thousands more unhoused Angelenos have come inside in her first year than the year before, leading to a reported drop in homelessness for the first time in years. Amazing. Under the mayor's leadership, LAPD received record numbers of applicants while homicide and violent crime deceased. 100,000 more city services like pothole repair and graffiti removal have been provided. Thousands of businesses opened. Hundreds of millions of dollars were secured through locking arms with state and federal partners as Los Angeles continues to urgently lead on climate. Mayor Bass was elected to make change for the people of Los Angeles by breaking the status quo to deliver the people of Los Angeles. Okay, Anna Malaika Tubbs is one of the youngest academics and women in history to hit the New York Times nonfiction list. Not just once, but twice. Achieving back-to-back bestsellers by the age of 33 is nearly unheard of distinction that cements her as a leading multidisciplinary expert on race, gender, and equity. With a PhD in sociology and a master's in multidisciplinary gender studies from the University of Cambridge, in addition to a bachelor's in medical anthropology from Stanford University, Anna translates her academic knowledge into stories that are clear and engaging. Her first book, The Three Mothers, How the Mothers of MLK Jr., Malcolm X, and James Baldwin Shaped the Nation, came out in 2021. And her second book, Erased, What American Patriarchy Has Hidden from Us, came out in May of 2025. Her cultural impact extends across both print and broadcast media. She has been featured on The View, CBS, This Morning, and Good Morning America. And her articles have been published by Time Magazine, New York Magazine, Newsweek, and The Guardian. Anna's storytelling also takes form in her talks, including her TED Talk that has been viewed 2 million times, as well as the scripted and unscripted screen projects she has in development. She lives in Los Angeles with her husband and 3 kids. So, without further ado, we are going to get the conversation started. This conversation will be moderated by the president and CEO of the California Black Women's Collective, Kellie Todd Griffin.
Thank you, Karina. Everyone give Karina a hand. Karina is responsible for all of this. I'm on sabbatical, so I just showed up today. Just so we are clear. So these questions may go off the script because I just read them, okay? So I want to start, and I'm going to start with you, Mayor Bass. Mayor Bass and I have known each other for over 15 years, believe it or not, longer than that. Yeah, because Austin is now 23. And it's because she gave me my first job in politics. I had no experience, no nothing, but she saw something in me and she hired me, and I haven't left politics ever since. I wasn't even registered to vote before before I didn't even know what a Democrat was. And so working for her, and I tell this, last night I was on a call with NCNW statewide, all of the chapters statewide, and I said, Mayor Karen Bass taught me how to be fearless. And so that is why we are here today, because that fearlessness meant that we could create something like this in our community unapologetically. So I wanted to give you your flowers because oftentimes, when you call me, it's like I'm still a staffer. And so now I'm on the stage with you and I feel like I can say some stuff now. FYI. All right. So I want to start the conversation about community mothering because Anna's book is really about three mothers who raised up leaders, but in their own right, they were also leaders and community mothers. It's just that their sons were big, but they poured into their sons. But I know that means a lot to us, but I know it means a really lot to you because being in your shadows for all these years and watching you in many different spaces, the reason we convene is because you told me when you were in a assembly, convene all the Black women. And we did it in Lamert Park, and you would do it once a quarter. And you taught me the power of sisterhood, but you said, make sure we include all of the community mothers. What made you understand the value of the community mothers and their voice?
Well, first of all, thank you, Kellie. It's nice to be on stage with you. And Anna, oh my goodness, what an incredible background you have at such a young age to have two bestsellers. That's a big deal. And I don't know if you read her bio, but she's like lived all over the world. Very, very interesting. But to me, first of all, I'm born and raised in LA, and I decided as a child that I wanted to devote my life to fighting for change. And I think it was the time period in which I grew up in that I just couldn't wait to grow up. I was in too much of a hurry. But and that's what I have done with my life. And so elected office has just been the latest phase of my life. But I was involved in community from way, way, way before ever thinking of running for office. But to me, if you really do believe in change and justice, if you really believe in that, then you have to be as invested in other people, carrying the torch, getting involved in the struggle. You have to be. And I have found over the years that the most rewarding thing I've ever done is been able to work with others and see others flourish. So yes, I remember, working with you in the very beginning, and now look at you, leading the whole organization.
That's right. That's how that works.
But this is what we want, because our struggles are so deep, and now we're going through this period. What were you talking about? The erasure? I mean, they're just about making us illegal, in terms of our history. And I'm sure you've been to our beautiful library. In DC, the African American Library, that took 100 years to build, by the way. And now, I wanted to tell the Lonnie, who started the library, he needs to close down all those exhibits and hide them and move them out of town before this guy gets a hold of them, and destroys them. So that's the reason why. I mean, to me, it's community mothering that I think I was raised with from my mother. My parents, by the way, never wanted me involved in politics. But it's because during the time I was growing up, they were worried I wouldn't survive, because too many people were being killed who were involved in politics. And so just like we felt when Obama started to run, you remember that? Black people were like, oh, don't do that, because we were afraid he wasn't going to survive. And so, but, you know, to me, it's all about nurturing. It's all about figuring out who the next leaders will be. And then you want as many leaders and as many fighters for justice out there, because they keep whooping us, but we keep fighting back. I mean, we're the most resilient people ever.
We really are. And speaking of resiliency, Anna, I actually met Anna's other half before I met her when he was mayor in Stockton. And I remember meeting him, and I actually hit him up on Facebook, and he thought I was some kind of, weird person, because I said I'd like to invest in you, because at the time I was in corporate. And he said, okay, we'll send an email to, and gave me whatever. And I sent the email in, and I ended up giving him a large sum of money because I was in corporate to do Stockton Scholars. And then he told me about you. And he was like, but you think I'm bad. At the time you were his fiance. He said, but wait till you meet Anna.
Oh, thank you.
And then we met you. And I was like, oh, yeah, you second tier. For real. So thank you for being here with us, because it's so important to have best-selling authors in our communities so that we can see what excellence is, and what we create is excellence. So thank you so much for being here. So, Three Mothers reminds us that history often remembers extraordinary leaders while overlooking the women who shaped them. I'd love to begin this question with that helps us think beyond motherhood in the traditional sense. Three Mothers argues that women who shape history often remain invisible. How do we define community mothering, and why is it essential to social change?
Well, first of all, I just want to say, all of us felt it.
Yeah.
First of all, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for this amazing opportunity. Kellie has always supported me. I am so grateful for you and your vision for combating the erasure of Black women. It is essential, especially right now. And Mayor Bass, what an incredible honor to be on this stage with you. When my second book came out, Mayor Bass hosted my launch party. The mayor of our city made time to host a book party for me. I cannot tell you, obviously we all know your incredible accomplishments for our city, but just knowing you personally, I am always blown away by your kindness and how powerful you are in that kindness. It's so wonderful to be here with all of you. Thank you for reading the book. Thank you so much for supporting me. And I want to just say something funny. I was in a room recently, it was for a lawyers association, and they had me in a room where all the pictures on the walls were white men. And I don't even think they really thought of the room they were putting me in, but I kind of laughed about it because I said, oh, none of these men would have wanted to hear this talk. But being in this room with these women on the walls is so incredibly powerful. So I want to say first and foremost that in this quote that we're talking about, extraordinary people are remembered by history, but we don't talk about the women who shaped them. I just want to edit it slightly, because these three mothers who I talk about in the book were extraordinary people, point blank, before they had children, when they had their children, and sadly, all three of them outlived their sons. And they were powerful as little girls who were dreaming of what was possible. So I just want to give a little bit of information in case there's anyone in the room who hasn't read the book. They basically did what their sons became famous for long before their sons were even a thought in their mind. And so the subtitle of the book is On Purpose, how the mothers of these men shaped a nation, not how they raised sons who shaped a nation. Their work as activists was already having an impact on all of us and would have one for generations to come, but people didn't know their names. And so many people will say to me, what a creative idea to think of the mothers. And I say in response to that, it's not creative at all. I'm not sure why somebody didn't think of this before me.
especially when we think of MLK Jr. We celebrate his birthday every year around January 15th, and nobody else had stopped to think about who else was in the room the day he was born. Potentially the woman who birthed him. And potentially she would have a really important story that we should celebrate. Who was she? And so when I started this project, I had no doubt that it was going to be interesting. When I Googled their names, there was nothing out there about them. We had lost track of them entirely. Now you can Google them because the book is there, but before there was nothing. And so I had to construct their stories through my research. And what infuriated me the most was everything that I found pointed to the fact that these sons walked directly in their mother's footsteps. So if we look at MLK Jr.'s mother, Alberta King, she was taught to believe that her faith was always intertwined with social justice, that if you had privileges like an education, they didn't make you better than anyone else, but that you used them to advance all the causes of our entire community, that you march, that you boycott. So she didn't call it nonviolent resistance. She was just already practicing it. So her husband, when he meets her, and he describes this in his own autobiography, he says that he was basically illiterate. He didn't have the same privileges that she had. And he couldn't have become who he was without her. So when they get married, he moves in with her. She helps him get into Morehouse. She tutors him. But at the time, if you chose to get married, you were not allowed to teach. This was a law. And so she has to walk away from her formal career because she chooses to start her family. So there's so much more I could say about Alberta, but clearly this is MLK Jr.'s mother. And even her husband, his father, would have said he was walking in her footsteps. We inherited Ebenezer Baptist Church from her parents. This is his maternal lineage, and we have erased that history. If we look at Malcolm X, his mother was an immigrant from Grenada. She was influenced by her grandparents, who were both at one point enslaved and were able to fight for their freedom. And they teach her that you fight for yourself by any means necessary, that it's better to die fighting for freedom than to live in captivity. So she carries this with her, and she wants to join an international movement for Black lives. So she joins the Marcus Garvey movement. As a teenager, she leaves Grenada and goes to Canada to join the Marcus Garvey movement. And we have heard throughout history about Malcolm X's father being an organizer, which is a beautiful thing. I'm never erasing the men. I'm actually giving them even more appreciation when we also talk about the women, because we better understand them that way. But no one had told us that they met each other because they were organizers together. That's where they met each other. And because Louise was so radical and so brave, she was well known by Marcus Garvey. And so when we talk about Malcolm X being someone who says, I fight for us by any means necessary, it's because he's following in Louise's footsteps, and we should know her history. And then when we look at Berdis Baldwin, there's so much I could say about all the women, but Berdis Baldwin, perhaps the most direct correlation to her son's work is that she was a writer. And she believed that through the power of language, through the power of telling people how to make it through the darkness of Jim Crow, make it through the darkness that you're coming up against in your life, by confronting it, you will find the light. You will find love. So when her son becomes the famous writer, James Baldwin, and he says he's a witness to the power of light, and he uses his writing to be that witness, he's not coming up with it out of thin air. He's directly quoting his mother. So when I say these women in their own right were extraordinary, I fully mean that. They were erased. And when we think about our community mothers, when I think about, I'm seeing all of you here today, the reason it resonates so much with us is because you have likely experienced this erasure too. The amount of times somebody else has probably been given credit for something you did or something you said. The way so often Black women are told, be humble, be in the background, to erase what we have contributed to not only this nation, but the entire world. that is what I am about combating. That's why these pictures on this wall mean so much to me, because this is how we make sure people know none of this happens without us and how extraordinary we are.
Karina, you might as well just take your little cards on that. She answered all the questions, but Mayor Bass and I, she answered them all. And Cheryl's over here. I told you to read the book. So, right. But I'm not gonna lie. But Mayor Bass and I were sitting here just like, Mayor Bass, what did those stories say to you? Like, what did that trigger for you?
Actually, it kind of pissed me off in a way. It did. You know what I mean? Because it's like, wow. And I obviously have not had a chance to read the book, even though we did the book signing over there. Yes. No, I actually have copies as well. I just, one of these days will be able to.
She's running a city.
But it is actually a little annoying to think about, because when it comes to Malcolm X, the only thing you ever heard about his mom was that she was mentally ill. That is the only thing you ever heard about her. And so you just, blew me away with that. On the one hand, it's shocking. On the other hand, it isn't. Because, of course, I think most of us, I know I was not raised with my parents, as I said, wanting me to be involved in politics. But they absolutely laid the foundation. Both my mother and my father. My mother, who grew up in Watts. But, and I look back at them and just very specific characteristics that they instilled in me. And also certain fears, too, because of the time, when they were growing up. But I think sometimes we don't take that into consideration. But it's so critical that you lifted up this history, because you can just think about it, and you think about leaders today. Nobody up there made it without other people showing them the way. I know they absolutely did with me. If there were not a series of adults in my life that said, don't do that, I most certainly would not be sitting here today. And I just really appreciated what you have written.
Thank you. And I want to say, too, that even if they haven't read the book, they have always supported my work. So it means the world to me. It doesn't erase that. Yeah.
I have. Yeah, that's right. I supported her work.
You did. She has.
Yes.
No doubt.
No
I want to speak to something Mayor Bass brought up, which was the way in which we'd represented Louise before my book came out. Because if you Googled her, the only thing that it said, and it was very derogatory, was that she had, quote unquote, gone crazy. So I'm going to tell you a little bit more about the background of that, again, for those who haven't read the book out there. I'm not only addressing everybody. So when I read that, I immediately said, there's more to this story. And this is why it's also really important for more Black women to do the research, be the authors, because we are going to see it very differently. We're going to pause for a second and say, that's not right. There's something there. I want to know more about it. And so I explained that she was this radical activist. So she was really hated by white men, the KKK, the Black Legion. And there's the scene of her in the Malcolm X film, Spike Lee's film, at the very beginning where she's standing up against the KKK, comes to her house, and she's pregnant with Malcolm X, and she says, I'm not afraid of you. My husband's not here. I'm not afraid of you. That is a real story. That is accurate. But her husband was murdered because they were both activists. And then she was told that it was an accident or that he had committed suicide to keep her from having any access to life insurance or any support. But Louise Little, she's very against any of these welfare systems coming into her home because she's worried about how they're going to vilify her and how they're going to try to take her children from her. And so at the same time, the state is sending people to evaluate her because, again, she is this activist. She's speaking loudly about white supremacy. And so they come in and say, we're going to have a doctor do an evaluation of your health. So her husband has just been murdered. They've also survived multiple racist attacks throughout their lives. And there's a white male doctor who writes a letter to the state. And I found access to it in my research, and I quote it in the book. But he says, a part of the reason that he's diagnosing her with a mental illness that he calls dementia praecox, right now we would call that schizophrenia, that's how we define it now, is because, quote, she's imagining being discriminated against.
And we all crazy.
All of us.
Because of this letter, now he voices other things, it's not the only reason, but it's one of the main reasons. But because of that, she is put away in a mental institution for 25 years of her life. This is why Malcolm X is taken and put in foster care, because his father has been murdered and his mother, a radical activist, has now been silenced. She says that this is like an incarceration, because when she's released after 25 years, she goes on to live another 25 years. And Malcolm X, if you go into Alex Haley's book, the very end in the epilogue, he talks about how she understood things better than any of them. She was not sick in that sense. She potentially was depressed. She potentially had PTSD, but she wasn't imagining anything. And so again, when we're thinking about how so often as Black women, we are gaslit by this nation, constantly attacked, and then in our responses to protect ourselves and our children are told, you're crazy, you're aggressive, you're making things up, you're angry. When in reality, we are fighting the way we deserve to fight for our dignity, for our respect, for our humanity. And that's all Louise Little was doing. And that's why she was silenced. And then for this many years, we all believed that she was mentally ill, that she was crazy, that she somehow had done something wrong. And the only people who did something wrong here, the state, that doctor, and every historian who got the story incorrect.
Now that was deep. Mayor Bass, I leaned over and I said, that reminds me of you because, again, I was with you in the state assembly. And one of the stories that I often tell about you was around, the fear, unapologetically not afraid, right? That you were fearless. And a story that I don't know if you remember, but we were in San Diego doing some groundwork in San Diego. And we walked into this place to eat, and there was no Black people in the place. And every other person that was in there turned and looked at us. And because, again, I wasn't in politics, I came out of corporate. So I was like, ooh, it's time to go. And I turned to walk away, and I looked back. I was feeling there was emptiness behind me. And I looked over, and you were sitting at the table. And you were like, we're going to eat here. They're going to serve us. And I always remember that. And that's why I say you taught me how to be fearless. As a community leader, why is that an important attribute to have?
Well, I think that you have to be. I don't think we have a choice. And if you think about that, what she was suffering from racism. And I always say that we're incredibly resilient because we should be going around the level of stress and all that racism brings on, that you have to be resilient. But I look at it like, when I have my moments, I just think about my ancestors. I just think about what they went through. I remember when Trump was elected the first time and we were all, going through a collective depression. I went to the African American Museum. I went to the basement. I spent 3 hours there. The basement is where you go through the period of enslavement. I watched every video, I read every exhibit, and I came out of there and I went, I mean, okay, we elected a crazy man, all right? And he's going to attack us. But look at what the people who came before me went through. And then, now it's like people say, ooh, how can you stand all the attacks you're going through? Well, one, because I keep my eyes on the prize. I know what I'm doing. I know what my purpose is. And my purpose has always been about our community, period. The reason why I left Congress was because I had become just obsessed with the number of Black folk on the street. I mean, we're only 9% of the population, and we're over 30% of the people in those tents. And then I was upset with us because there was no mass movement saying, save our people. And so that's why I took the leap of leaving Congress, even though what I loved about Congress was I was involved in Africa, and I was the point person for Democrats on Africa policy in the House. But, I had to leave that behind because my people needed me here. And so people said, well, how can you withstand the attacks? Well, I mean, number one, I'm not worried about being killed because I have these amazing people who protect me, like that young woman right there, Amber, and Robert in the back, who are really more like my family than anything else. So I'm not worried about that. And then I've been through the worst possible thing anybody could be through in losing my kids. So it's like, hey, so long as you're not gonna kill me. But we have to be resilient. We know what the playbook is. History tells us that. I do worry that younger people today who are involved politically do not get why they need to understand history. And obviously it's for the old saying, if you don't know it, you're going to repeat it. But that's minor. You need to know the history because there's nothing that anybody is doing today that ain't been done before, hasn't been tried before. And so I think that we have an obligation to be fearless, and we have a requirement because of those who came before us, and because our people need us to be on the front lines fighting. And to me, that is the basis of fearlessness.
I love that. What makes you so fearless? I'm sure telling these stories, you ruffled some feathers, particularly with the historians that have been telling the stories in the past. So what gave you that strength?
I would say my mom was always calling out patriarchy everywhere. She was calling out the erasure of women everywhere. I should say my mom was a white woman. She was an incredible ally. She was just very fierce and always also told me that she didn't know what it was going to be like to walk in my shoes, but that she was going to walk beside me and do her part to make this world worthy of me. And so that, absolutely having my mother. My father is Ghanaian, and if anyone's been to Ghana, we're very proud of our history, of our fight against colonialism. I always heard the story of Ya Asentua, which was one of our queen mothers who fought against the British soldiers. And so those were the lessons that I grew up hearing constantly. You fight, you tell your history, you never forget where you came from. And that's what I am always inspired to do. And I completely agree with Mayor Bass. My next book is actually largely about this, that when we're sitting here saying, and that's not really us, but a lot of people saying, this is the worst we've ever seen. If we look at ICE, for example, it is horrific, right? I'm not minimizing how painful it is, but it's not the worst we've ever seen. When people say, how could this happen in the United States of America? Of course it's happening in the United States of America. What history are you learning? But that's the problem, right? Those are the attacks. Oh, it's one of those. Some people believe that it's an ancestor, so you never know. Anyways. This notion that we haven't been here before and that this country has somehow been built on freedom and equity. That's not true. And so I can hear it buzzing. Yeah. It's just one of those little beetles. Yeah, they can't see anything. Yeah. It's fine. Yes, I love it. I was saying, because when I'm going to give a quick tangent story, but when my daughter was born, I had a home birth with her, and my midwife said there was a beetle that came. We were sitting outside. She was coming to check on me, and there was this one of these beetles flying above us, and I was like dodging it. I was so afraid. And she was like, "Oh, we believe that that's an ancestor visiting." So we can just say that in this talk about history. But anyways, so that is for me the same exact thing what Mayor Bass was saying. If you study this history, like I did, and especially the three women who I wrote about in my first book, if you think about Alberta, Berdis, and Louise, they were born in the early 1900s when lynchings are rampant, okay? When they've survived 2 world wars, right? The men in their lives are being drafted to wars that they're not even going to be able to participate in the freedoms that they're fighting for, supposedly. Then they live through the Great Depression. They have their children shortly after the Great Depression. They are part of their own civil rights movement, these 3 women, like I already mentioned. And then they inspire their sons to lead the most famous civil rights movement in the world. But I also spoke about what they went through, what they lost in service of this civil rights movement. But they lived long enough because of their fight, because not only of their resilience, but their holding on to love, holding on to their children, being able to dream. That's what they were teaching their children. None of the 3 of them were trying to make their children civil rights icons. That wasn't their goal, right? There's not a go-to book for how to raise a civil rights icon. But what they were interested in, the revolutionary thing that they did, was teach their children to continue to dream in a nation that told them they couldn't. To teach their children to still seek love, to experience joy in a nation that told them that they shouldn't. That was the radical part of their Black mothering, while also showing them how they were activists. This is how we've done it. This is how you can do it too. And they lived long enough to see, two of them lived long enough to see the first episodes of the Oprah Winfrey Show. Imagine that, to be a little girl while lynchings are rampant, to think that someday there could be somebody like Oprah Winfrey, but they did believe in that. That's why they fought for it. Something that seemed impossible, they fought for it. They lived long enough to maybe have heard of a man named Barack Obama, because he was not elected president, but he was already in office. So Berdis Baldwin, on one end of her life, she overlapped with Harriet Tubman. On the other end of her life, she overlapped with me. So when we talk about fearlessness, I don't even think what I do is something that people should be afraid of, but all the time people are like, aren't you worried? Aren't you worried something's gonna happen? And no, I'm just not. Even if someone were to try to do something, this is the legacy that I'm carrying. I believe in the things that seem impossible, and I have to speak them into existence. And I believe that my role on this larger team is my writing. I believe that's why I've been gifted this tool, to make sure our history is told correctly, to make sure we have tools to fight this erasure, and to make sure, we have 2 minutes, and to make sure that everyone else, all of the different roles that we play, whether it's being in office, whether it's making sure that we have the data that Kellie and her team produce, whether it's having these exhibitions, these events that make everybody aware of what we need to do, we're all a part of a larger team. And for me, I'm a storyteller. And so I don't feel the fear, because it feels like this is just my purpose, and I have no other choice but to fulfill it.
Thank you. I'm glad you could see that, because I didn't have my glasses on. But before we wrap it up, Mayor Bass, I do want to, we're talking about, in this whole series, about women in the movement and women who have done extraordinary things. And I have been able to experience history because of you, which is why you had that big A picture, as you said, in the room. Be remiss to make your picture small. But in speaking about being a history maker, I mean, we're talking about what's in the book about women, but you have made history not once but twice as the first Black woman to run. And actually, you were the first person to run a state legislature, right? No, first Black woman. And then you became the first Black woman mayor. What does it feel like to be a history maker beyond all the nonsense? Yes, what does that feel like?
Well, honestly, I don't think of it because my mission is still underway. And there's so much that I want to and have to and need to accomplish. But I do understand that it is an incredible weight and it is an incredible responsibility. And just so you know, I mean, let me be real with you for a minute. That's why, you fight. So all of the nonsense going on about me, I mean, I stole over $1 billion. I can't find a dollar though. I have been looking. My family wants to know where it is. But
your friends want to know where it is too. Your former employee wants to know too.
You're all invited over to my house when I find it. But all of the nonsense that is said about me also drives me to win this election because I don't personally want to go down with all of this nonsense that's out there. And we're in a period that we've never experienced before with social media. And unfortunately, the standard was set by the president. So you can just lie as, I don't know if you was watching that debate on Wednesday, but I mean, just make stuff up. And there used to be standards and those don't exist anymore. But I just, so to me, it's all about the responsibility. And I think I'll feel really good when my folks are not on the street. And then I'll feel like, this has been a huge accomplishment and all of that. So I don't, to me, ego and all of that stuff is, as long as our people are suffering, I don't have anything to be egotistical about. I don't. Let me say a couple things, though, because as I was listening to you, and you mentioned lynchings, and I don't know, you guys are all following these hangings, these hangings that are happening mysteriously, and as you mentioned, there were hangings that happened back then that they were told they were suicide, and we've had them here locally, but most of them are in the South now. These mysterious deaths of Black men and women through hanging. I also think about the community mothering, and I wanted to make a comment about that too, because if you think about us culturally, going back hundreds of years through the period of enslavement, we've always had to community mother and father because our children were always taken away from us. To this day, our children are constantly taken away from us, which is why, and we've always raised other children. And I know one of the values that I know I got from my mother, which is all children are my children. I mean, you have a responsibility for all children. And they have to be, it's the children and the elderly. It's the beginning and the end of the life cycle that you must pay the most attention to and have the obligation with. But it's also why, as you know, Kelly, because we went through this together, why I got involved in foster care. Because when I started, when I walked away from another job, which I was on the faculty at USC Medical School, and I walked away from that because of what was happening in South Central at the time, the Crips and the Bloods, 1,000 homicides, AIDS, and crack. And we were going through what I described to other people, if you want to know what that period felt like, it felt like COVID. in the sense that we were dying everywhere and we didn't understand what, was happening. But remember, that led to, because on these different periods in history, our children are taken away. That's why, the mothers were concerned about, especially Malcolm's mother. She didn't want social services to come in her house because they might have taken her children away. Our children have always been taken from us. But I will tell you, in the 90s, when crack cocaine hit, our children were taken away in massive numbers. And that's when we had this, upsurge of foster care. It was because it was the first time there was a drug epidemic that impacted women equal to men. That had not happened before. Crack, did that. And so when a mother becomes addicted, then the children, the whole family falls apart. But rather than take those children and place them with the family member, the county, and this wasn't particular to our county, chose to pay and support financially strangers, but would not support the grandmothers. So we started a campaign to get the grandmothers to receive financial support. It was almost punishment. It was like, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. You screwed up your kids. Why would I pay you? It's your obligation. Anyway, I just think that that's the origin of, and if you go back to Africa, of course, you find that in the village. You take care of everybody that's there. But we have had to do that. And so that's why we all have these cousins. We got these cousins and aunties and uncles.
Sisters.
Right.
Well, I want to thank you both for joining us. This was a wonderful conversation. Again, I want to thank our team. I know Charles is here and Phyllis is here. I want to thank our security that we come. I told her, I have security because when I work for you, you always had security and at our events, because we want to make sure Black women are always protected. So please enjoy the rest of today and enjoy these wonderful portraits, as well as you'll go through the museum. Yes. Yeah, I see her. Yeah. In this wonderful museum. But please, right now, thank Mayor Karen Bass. Thank you. We got people now. I'm not the president and CEO of California Black Women's Collective right now. Vote for Karen Bass if you live in Los Angeles City. We need to keep this Black woman in office, and make sure you don't just tell a friend, you tell all friends, family, and everything in between, particularly those who are, voting is so important, and we're seeing that so many young people do not want to vote, and we do need to continue to vote. I also want to thank Sharice Breeman for coming from Brotherhood Crusade, as well as Ingrid Hutt from the Hutt Group, Dr. Regina Smith from the Los Angeles County Commission on the Status of Women. That is our president, because Black women do it all the time. Thank you.